Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See detail.
Welcome to Ballot Battleground Nevada. I'm your host, Ben Margiott, a reporter at KRNV News 4 in Reno. I'm passionate about making politics in this critical battleground state more digestible to the average voter and pushing past the talking points to press politicians for answers. On this show, we take deep dives into the people, ideas, and debates shaping Silver State politics. It's the final countdown. Less than 2 weeks remain until Election Day 2024. I saw a great post this week saying the election is officially in carton of milk range. So if you buy a gallon of milk today, we'll likely know the next president before that milk spoils. Already, over 320,000 Nevadans have cast their ballot, whether online for our military and overseas voters, in person during the first 4 days of early voting, or the biggest chunk, voting by mail. On this episode, we've got a lot to get to, a deeper dive on those early voting numbers and what they may reveal, a quick update on some unproven claims of voting irregularities from the Washoe County Republican Party, and later we'll hear from pollster Dr. Stephen Kull. He's done 10 surveys in Nevada and other swing states and has some interesting insights on how Nevadans feel about the most critical issues in this election. But first, we'll take you out to the polls with some of the sounds of the first weekend of early voting across the Silver State, featuring some big names, including Lil Jon at a UNR Get Out the Vote event and former President Barack Obama down in Las Vegas.
The point is, if you elect Kamala and Tim, they will not be focused on their problems. They will be focused on yours. We have had enough of arrogance and bumbling and bluster and division. America's ready to turn the page. We're ready for a better story. We are ready for a President, Kamala Harris.
Inside the actual vote centers, things were a little less fun, but even more important. We went to one polling place at a gym in South Reno midday Monday and found a line almost out the door, with people waiting about a half an hour to cast their ballots.
The waiting was not that bad. It was easier last time, but this time's a big election, so.
I just dropped off my ballots in the box, so I got to go around the line.
Very good.
So it was great.
Yeah, nice and easy.
Nice and easy.
I voted in person, yes.
Very good. How come you prefer that? Yeah.
I think it's a little bit more reliable.
It was smooth and easy. We had maybe, a 15-minute line, something like that.
Okay.
It wasn't too bad.
Yeah.
Went pretty quick. And the voting was easy process.
Good. Okay, glad to hear that. After a strong start Saturday, things slowed down on Sunday when polls in all of Nevada's rural counties were closed, but it ramped back up Monday and Tuesday. After the first 4 days of early voting, 320,578 Nevadans have voted. Unlike previous cycles, when Democrats jump out to an early lead during the early vote period, it's been Republicans who have shown up in stronger numbers so far. After Tuesday, 127,978 registered Republicans have voted, compared to 114,571 registered Democrats, a lead of 13,692. As a reminder, these are not results, just the party affiliation of the people that have voted so far. Roughly 78,000 nonpartisans and members of third parties have voted as well. One quick update on some posts you might have seen circulating on social media. The Washoe County Republican Party claimed in multiple posts on X, and John Ralston says they even sent this to their email list, that voting machines were switching people's votes from Donald Trump to Kamala Harris. They provided no evidence to support this claim, and sure enough, by the time we contacted the Washoe GOP chairman Bruce Parks, those posts had been deleted. Washoe County election officials said simply, quote, "There have been no irregularities with voting machines," end quote. We did reach out to the Washoe GOP for comment on this. We'll let you know if we hear back. Unfortunately, as is often the case with misinformation, even though their posts have been deleted, the claims are still circulating on other accounts, and Washoe GOP has not issued a correction or apology. Okay, let's get to our interview today. We had the great opportunity to pick the brain of a well-respected pollster, Dr. Stephen Kull, the director of the University of Maryland's Program for Public Consultation. He's a political psychologist who's done 10 surveys in Nevada and several other swing states, as well as national polls. He was in Las Vegas last weekend to speak at IndieFest 2024, the event hosted by the Nevada Independent. He joined Ballot Battleground Nevada to share what he's learned hearing from hundreds of voters in our swing state. I learned a lot speaking to Dr. Kull, and I think you will too. Dr. Kull, we really appreciate you coming on the show. Appreciate getting some of your time. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Tell our listeners and viewers what you've been up to. You've done a handful of surveys here in the Silver State. How many people are you talking to? What specifically are you hoping to learn from voters?
Well, over the last few months, we've done 10 surveys. These are in-depth surveys with, in each case, about 600 Nevadans. And we do this process, we call it a policymaking simulation, where we put the respondent in the shoes of a policymaker and we give them a short briefing on the issue, and they evaluate pro and con arguments for various positions. And we have it all reviewed by outside experts, pro and con, to make sure it's balanced and accurate and so on. And we've been covering all of the big topics that are being discussed: immigration, trade, families and children, abortion, birth control, and so on. Trying to find out what Nevadans think about these key issues that are coming up in the context of the election, and will play a big role, of course, in the next administration.
Certainly. Yeah, these issue polls, I think, are especially illuminating because you have the horse race polls, Harris, Trump. In our Senate race, it's Brown, Rosen, and you guys aren't doing the specific candidate polls, though. You guys are looking specifically at the issues.
That's right.
Very good. Okay. In broad strokes, what have you learned? And also, are these polls that are talking to the same groups of voters over the course of several months to see if their opinions are shifting, or are they different surveys looking at entirely different universes of voters?
Well, there's some overlap in the people who participate, but we're not so much looking for the change as much as, where people are on these specific issues. But I wouldn't expect these positions to change, certainly over such a short period of time. But there's some people who overlap, but there's also a lot of change from survey to survey.
Awesome. Walk me through a couple of the big issue topics here that you've tested, maybe starting with abortion. I see immigration on here as well. Mm-hmm. In broad strokes, what are you finding from hearing from voters?
Well, it's interesting on abortion. You may hear in some standard polls, do you think the government should allow abortion? And then, the government doesn't really allow abortion or not allow it. It doesn't send out a message if we hereby allow abortion. The real issue is whether abortion should be criminalized. And that's the kind of survey that we do. We focus very much on the actual legal choice involved. And in this case, it's do people favor criminalizing abortions? And we found that, in fact, there was a bipartisan common ground to not criminalize abortion before fetal viability. Some Democrats were willing to go further on that, but a majority of Republicans oppose criminalization before fetal viability. Now, there are differences on the question of whether a woman should be required to see an ultrasound or if there should be a waiting period, whether federal government money should be used. But on the kind of overarching question about whether abortion should be criminalized, there was actually rather robust bipartisan consensus. 69% of Republicans, as well as 90% Democrats, overall was 80% for not criminalizing.
Interesting. Yeah. And Nevada has an abortion-related ballot measure, and it doesn't deal specifically with the criminalization. It's enshrining protections in the Constitution. So obviously a little bit different than what you're asking, but you're finding kind of overall bipartisan support for abortion access generally.
Mm-hmm. Right. There's some debate about whether this should become a federal law. Overall, 2/3 think it should be governed by a federal law, not by a state law, but Republicans are divided on that question. And there's also very robust bipartisan support for trying to reduce the need for abortions by increasing access to birth control and removing any restrictions on to birth control, providing education about birth control. And that is a very bipartisan position as well.
Walk me through some of these other major policies that you asked about: healthcare, immigration, Social Security, et cetera.
Sure. Let's take immigration. Obviously, one of the biggest questions is the border, and there's support for strengthening the border, having more border patrol agents, an increase of 2,000 or so. Now, one you've heard about a lot is this idea of mass deportation. And over the years, there have been a number of surveys by us and others that have found that for dealing with the people who have been here for a while, there are 11 million people in the country who have been here for extended periods, most of them more than a decade. And so the question, what do you do about them? One is trying to put up barriers so new people don't come in. But what about the people who've been here for quite a while? So the option, providing these people a visa for a while, and then they have to pay back taxes, pay a penalty, and then they can apply for citizenship. We put that against the idea of mass deportation. Now, if you just say mass deportation, it really isn't very clear to people what that means, because there have been some polls that asked about, do you favor post-mass deportation? But what does that mean? Is that 1,000 people?
Yeah.
100,000? Well, actually, we're talking about 11 million people, and it would be a very major operation, and we explained that to them, and there would be substantial cost. And people went through the pro and con arguments on both sides. This is a really key thing, is that they hear both the pro and the con arguments. And when they were then faced with the decision about which way to go, it was basically 2-1 in favor of the path to citizenship. And in Nevada, it was 65% for the path to citizenship approach and 24% for mass deportation. Now, we also looked at, again, coming back to the people crossing the border, the people don't want people to just keep coming in like this. And why are they coming here? Well, they're coming here primarily to get a job, and people are hiring them. So one proposal is to require that employers verify the legal status of people using the system called E-Verify. And that gets a majority support. There's also support for having more worker visas, because there is this need, there is this demand, and particularly in agriculture and hospitality industries. And there's strong support for that. And when you put those together in a package, you get rather robust support for doing both of those things, putting in the requirement for verification and having more worker visas. So what's the pattern here? Well, the pattern we see here is not that people don't want immigrants or do want immigrants. It's not that simple. They mostly want the system to be regulated, to not to be so much chaos. So many people who have been living here for a while and don't have any legal status. They want to change that, and they want to have workers coming in on a legal basis. That also creates the potential for regulating how they're treated, so that they are paid the same wages as Americans, so that they don't undercut Americans. So, you put all this together, and there's actually a pretty clear bipartisan consensus about how to approach the situation.
Reading through a number of these other topics, I'm sensing a pattern. I'm going to make this kind of take to you and see what you think of it, if you agree of my read of this. We go through abortion, opposing, criminalizing abortion, favoring making ACA subsidies permanent. People support the higher child tax credit, universal preschool, subsidized childcare. They like the tax credits for electric vehicles and clean energy. They oppose raising tariffs on all imports. And they support raising taxes and reducing benefits for high-income earners. If you were to categorize all of those things into one bucket, those sound like a lot of Democratic priorities by and large. And I know you're not asking who you're going to vote for in November, but what do you make of the fact that seems to be majority support for many of these Democratic priorities and policies, and yet the horse race is essentially a neck-and-neck tie?
Yeah, what drives the elections isn't really so much policy positions. People have affiliations with one party or the other. They have responses to candidates. There is some relationship to policy positions, but I should underscore that there are, in terms of healthcare, there's strong support for the conservative idea of having more transparency of costs and things like that. E-Verify is very much a Republican proposal to regulate the employment of immigrants immigrants, and there are certainly others. But yes, there are a substantial number of Democratic proposals that do get support. Now, on the electric vehicles, basically all of the proposals, people have come to accept those, having more tax credits for energy efficiency and things like that. And there isn't a big push for more at this point, but people have come to say, yeah, these things do make sense. I mean, I think it might be better if there was more discussion of policy issues in the election, and just in terms of the quality of democracy. But what drives many of these decisions is, again, long-term affiliation with one party or the other.
Yeah, fair enough. Appreciate that explanation. What stood out to you about doing these surveys? And then as well, you have surveyed a number of battleground states. Is there anything specific or unique that you've found in the Nevada results?
Well, there are little differences here and there, but I'm not sure that they add up to much. What I found most striking is how much common ground there is, bipartisan common ground on issues in Nevada and in the other swing states as well, and nationally. When people actually focus on the policy issues, they don't just say, okay, which team are you on? We'll focus on the policy issues. They do tend to find a remarkable amount of bipartisan common ground. Clearly, if the people were more in charge than Congress, we would resolve a lot of these issues and there would be less gridlock and polarization.
And then any interesting insights from looking at the crosstabs? And for our listeners who might not know, crosstabs are when they kind of break down how do different genders, age groups, racial groups, socioeconomic backgrounds, how do different specific smaller groups of people feel about certain issues? Anything that stood out to you for a particular group feeling about these issues?
There are variations, but it tends to be the level of intensity or the size of the majority. It's very rare for one group to go one way and the other group to go another way. The biggest variations are by party, and those are not as great as you might think. But, when you take something like trade, there's a proposal to raise tariffs, and we explored that, the idea of having it across the board. Now, the U.S. actually has agreements with a lot of countries to mutually keep low tariffs, and we explained that to them. And people with higher levels of education are more informed about that and are more supportive of keeping low tariffs and are more opposed to doing an across-the-board increase on tariffs. But even among people with low education, they favor mutually low tariffs as well, though just the majority is not as large.
All right, Dr. Stephen Kull, we really appreciate getting some of your time here speaking to listeners and viewers in Northern Nevada. Dr. Kull, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
A special thanks to Dr. Stephen Kull for coming on the pod this week. A couple things before we go. Senator J.D. Vance, Donald Trump's running mate, is coming to Northern Nevada today, Wednesday. He will likely already have held his Reno rally by the time you listen to this. As we've done with all the major rallies in Northern Nevada this cycle, we'll have a full recap on our next episode. And finally, I know all of you guys have either already voted or you do have a plan to vote soon. But in the off chance you haven't, we have a link to all the polling places in Washoe County and all of the Silver State in the show notes. Early voting runs through Friday, November 1st. You can vote in person early, by mail, or on Election Day. There are no excuses. Get out there and do your civic duty. Okay, if you've enjoyed Ballot Battleground Nevada or learned something by listening, help us spread the word. Send this episode or any of our previous shows to a coworker, family member, friend, anyone. And as always, if you want to spread the word with some swag, shoot me an email or tag me on social media, and I can mail you a Ballot Battleground Nevada sticker. My email is bjmargiott, MARGIOTT, @sbgtv.com. As you can imagine, it is chaotic right now trying to stay on top of all the election news, so I'm not exactly sure when our next episode will be, but we're trying to put out as many shows as we can before Election Day, so please forgive our unpredictable schedule in the home stretch. Thanks so much for listening. Go vote, and we'll be back in your feed with another episode soon.